Everyone. So I want to do a series of videos regarding a trip to Africa that I did recently. Um, because I realized, I've seen pictures of African safaris for years, right? I've always been interested in potentially seeing animals in their natural habitat. Um, and one of the things that I always felt kind of weird about was I didn't know exactly how to go about booking something like that. And I felt like uh, I just didn't have confidence in myself to do it on my own. So I eventually acquired a bookkeeping client that actually does African safaris. The woman who started this business in the United States. She's originally from South Africa, so she knew a lot about them. And as I started working with them and helping them keep track of their travel parties, I realized, oh, this might not be terribly difficult if you've got a good partner like that to help you. Okay. So the company that I used is Africa Dynamics. Um, and they're incredible. They're based in Bellevue, Washington, in the United States, and they're really, really good. So, what I want to do today as a kickoff to kind of what it's like to go on safari is to just talk about some of the prepping we did, some of the things that we didn't use at all. You know, now some of that is due to the time of year that we went, I think, but I'll get into all of that. And also to talk about be prepared for potentially how long it can take you to get there. Okay. Um, and what you can do about that. Um, so first of all, in doing the prepping and the planning, probably one of the things you probably would already kind of sort of intuitively understand is that you you want to have clothing items that don't attract the tsetse flies, right? Um, and and so we spent a lot of time trying to find items that were the tan color, the light browns, beige, that type of thing, or the olive green kind of colors. So we spent quite a bit of time looking for that sort of stuff. Now, one of the things that we did too, which we didn't necessarily have to do because of the type of camps we were going to, um, uh, was having washable underwear items, like socks and things like that. Um, Meaning, quick dry, because we thought we would have to sort of wash those out ourselves, and all that sort of thing. And they would need to dry quickly so that we could use them the next day or the next couple of days. Um, and as it turned out, because of the type of camps that we went to, we didn't necessarily have to worry too much about that. Um, so because the camps that we went to um, had laundry every day, that you could take advantage of. Um, so one good thing to always ask about is, do they handle things like that so that you can better prepare on if you need quick dry items that you have to wash out by hand. Also, one of the things that was quite interesting in preparing for, we were going to be in Africa for 2 weeks, and we had gotten information that we needed to tip guides and tip some of the staff and things like that. And when you add all that money up, as far as what you think you'll probably be tipping, it's kind of like, whoa, it was a fairly large number, right? Um, so you definitely want to have a way to keep that safe and secure. And of course, there's all kinds of um, things that you can strap to yourself, to keep that on your person at all times and not worry about that getting stolen. But one of the challenges I had was the information that we had, and I don't know how accurate this is or not, but the information we had said that you had to get bills that were 2016 or newer. And that proved to be interesting, right? So getting ones and fives and tens and twenties as 2016 or newer, I had to go to like five different banks, you know. And so the bank that I bank with has a lot of branches close by. And so I just went to as many of them as I had to get the right denominations and the right years. I don't know if that's because of some sort of money laundering laws. I don't know what that is all about, but um, that was something that I went through in planning and preparing for this. Um, I also will tell you that once we got there, um, um, we didn't need a lot of the clothes that we took with us, in all honesty. We kind of wore the same thing every few days. Now that I think is entirely dependent upon the time of year that you go. We went in the African winter. So it was very similar to some degree to the kind of weather we're used to. And the weather that we're used to is just not being that hot all the time. So in the time of year that we went, nights were in the 40s, 50s. During the day, it was in the 70s, like upper 70s, maybe low 80s. It wasn't terribly hot. We didn't sweat a lot, in other words, So we didn't have to have as many changes of clothes as what we thought we might need. So that's one thing to think about. Now, the African summer, I bet, is a lot hotter, in the 90s and 100s, um, because honestly, people were freezing that were African native populations, where we felt like in the African winter it was actually rather pleasant for us. So we didn't have to necessarily wear heavy jackets or anything like that. Um, but those were kind of some of the things that we did in preparing for the trip. Um, and there we also went to Columbia Sportswear. So depending on where you are, it could be REI or some other sports oriented type store to get things, but that's kind of where we went. And I also supplemented on Amazon getting stuff. All right. So yeah, those were kind of the big deals as far as getting prepared to go there. Now, part of the reason some of this was a challenge was, and you may not realize it, is that, um, so once you're actually in the continent of Africa and traveling to these different countries, they do have weight restrictions. And it makes sense when you think about it because you're flying to camps and between camps in small planes. So, for example, we were in a Cessna four-seater plane. We were in another plane that maybe held 12 to 14 passengers, maybe 15. So these are really small planes. So there are often restrictions on how much weight you can carry in total. So for example, for us, we were limited to 44 pounds total. Okay. Now, one of the things that I had worried about ahead of time was just how close we would be to animals. Did I need a zoom lens on my camera? Did I need to carry a heavy camera and some lenses, to get a good zoom and all that? And don't worry about that. Animals are pretty close to you a lot of times in those vehicles. So in all honesty, and you'll see some from some future videos, we were pretty close to animals most of the time. Some of them were a little farther away, but a lot of times they were within 20, 30 feet, sometimes as close as a couple of feet. you know, I mean, they honestly right there. And my cell phone took really good photos most of the time. Not every photo turns out great, and oftentimes I was going click, 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 just to get as many as I could, and then I would cull through them later. And so I've deleted a bunch, but I still got a lot that were really good. Okay. So you don't have to necessarily carry heavy equipment unless there's some other purpose for that for you. All right. Now, getting there, of course, I was coming from uh, the Pacific coast of the United States to Africa. Um, so it took quite a few days to actually get to our first camp. So be aware of just how long that first leg of your journey, just how long it will take to get there. So, for instance, for us, um, we flew from the Pacific coast straight to Frankfurt, Germany, and that was a 10-plus-hour flight. Now, we decided to spend the extra money to do business class on these international flights. And the reason for that was the seats will either fully recline or get pretty darn close to fully reclining. And we wanted to make sure, because we're older, over 60 now, that, we had the chance to really rest, okay, because of just how long it was going to take us to get to our first camp. And so we did spring a little bit more, but for example, we took 5 different flights that were part of our um, major cost of flights, you know. And it actually wasn't too bad considering when you divide by the number of flights. It ended up being about $2,000 per flight, roughly. Actually less than that, probably $1,500 per flight. So when you consider it being business class, it's not bad. And it gives you a lot more room and you can actually recline and rest. Now, that first flight, flying from the Pacific coast to Frankfurt, what was interesting about that one and a challenge about that one is you really do need to have something that will cover your eyes. You need a sleep mask if you really want to try and sleep. Okay. Because they try to mimic nighttime on those flights by putting the shades down and turning off all the lights in the cabin. But honestly, your brain and your eyeballs know that there's light outside. And so even though we were flying overnight, we were flying against the rotation of the Earth. So the sun never actually set. And so I had challenges sleeping on that first flight, even though it was 10 plus hours long. Um, and, so you need good earplugs and a sleep mask in order to actually really trick your brain into knowing that it's time to go to sleep. When we got to Frankfurt, we had a really long layover, which we had thought originally that Frankfurt would have a lot more services, and they do. But you actually had to walk to get to some of those things. And so, it was like, whatever, we're not gonna, we were tired by that point in time and just really didn't do that. So we had a really long, boring layover that was kind of hard to kind of deal with. But for younger individuals, it's probably not a big deal to hike to some of the things that they had at that airport. But all we wanted to do was sleep and try to get some sleep there. And they actually do have some decent facilities for that. Then we had another 10 plus hour flight from Frankfurt to Johannesburg. We spent the night right at the hotel, at a really fabulous hotel right at the Johannesburg airport called the Intercontinental. It's beautiful. If you have to stay there, I highly recommend it. It's really good. So we just spent the night there. The next day, we walked back over to the Johannesburg airport, and then we flew from Johannesburg in South Africa to Harare, Zimbabwe. So we were going to our first camp there. Now, once we got to Harare, of course, there's immigration you have to go through. We had been told that we could pre-fill out this information. That ended up not being correct. We still had to fill out a piece of paper and all that. And it took a little time to get through the Zimbabwe immigration. But once we got through that, a lot of times when you're working with these African safaris, you get help in transfers. It just so happened that at Zimbabwe, at immigration, they can't come in and actually help you. You kind of have to do that on your own. Hopefully, maybe that'll change someday, but at least for when we went, we had to do it ourselves. But the person who was helping us was on the other side of that. So once we got through, they helped us get to the next place where we actually got onto our first bush plane, which ended up being a small Cessna, a four-seater, and so those can be kind of bumpy. Be prepared for that, so have some nausea medication. It was kind of bumpy because we didn't get out of there until late in the afternoon. And so it was a little hotter during the afternoon time, around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it made it a little rougher as we were flying. So having some anti-nausea pills or something like that, maybe whatever you can find would be good, as a just in case kind of thing. And we finally got to our first bush camp, and it took like 3.5 calendar days to get there. So just be prepared, especially if you're coming from the Pacific Coast anywhere um, in North America. It's going to be kind of a travel odyssey to get there. And there were some other travel odysseys, which I'll describe on other videos. But that was kind of our experience of prepping and getting ready for this. And actually, that's how long it took to get to that first camp. So, as a parting piece of information, when we decided to actually go to Africa, we decided that because of travel times, that we felt like just doing a week in Africa for us would not be enough. Plus, we're older, and so we thought that to kind of help our rhythms and our sleep and various things like that, we decided to have at least 2 weeks in Africa so that our bodies could kind of get used to that time, get used to the pace, all that kind of stuff, and not be rushed to get out of there or anything. So we spent 2 weeks there. But also, the longer you stay, the more it costs. So, you'll have to kind of weigh that for your own trip. So, what's going to be coming up is I'm going to go through like each day of the safari and kind of show you some of the pictures that I took of the amazing animals. Talk about kind of what it's like to be on a safari. Because in all honesty, I've thought about this. I've thought about, people have asked me, what's it like to go to Africa? And it's like, it's more than you can imagine, right? And so the only way that I can describe it to you is to say, before going to Africa, I had a very fragmented idea of what going on safari meant because I've seen for years videos and pictures of people being on safari. So I kind of had an idea of that, of what the game drives were like and things like that. But the everyday, day to day of the experience of being there, of meeting the people, being in the camps, going on the drives, yes, of course, that too. But when it's described in detail and you can kind of see some of these things that are typically not in a wildlife photograph or a game drive video, it takes on a different meaning. And I think you'll see when you hear some of the experiences that we had that were not game drives, had nothing to do with that. But it adds an element that is not captured in just a photo of an elephant or a game drive where you're looking at a lion. Okay. It's just there are certain things that those things do not capture. Okay. They're amazing. Okay. But when you take it in context of other things, it adds dimensions to it that the other stuff just doesn't describe. Okay. And I think you'll understand what I'm talking about when some of these other videos come out. Okay. So if this inspires you to go to Africa, I highly recommend Africa Dynamics. You can look them up on the web. They're based in Bellevue, Washington, and they're awesome. There are other companies like them, so you could probably find others that do just as well. But I highly recommend them. Okay. All right. Talk to you soon.